welcome back to my channel. I'm Danielle and I'm the owner of Damn Fancy Creations and the Drunk Flamingo Glitter. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you guys how I created this fun, bright pink, trendy cowgirl tumbler. This cup is a little similar to the cups we've been learning the past couple of weeks because it does have a checkerboard pattern, but this is definitely a brighter color palette, and we are going to be ombreing that spray paint as you can see here. We are also going to be doing a half vinyl wrap, and if you guys do vinyl wraps, you will know that 9 times out of 10, that seam is not going to meet up how you want it to. So today, I'm going to be showing you how I blend my seam. Sometimes the seam doesn't bother me, sometimes it does, it just depends on the pattern, but I wanted to go ahead and show you guys the little tips and tricks that I do to help disguise that seam. So here's our seam right here, but you can hardly tell. So we're going to be taking elements from our pattern vinyl sheet and we're going to apply them like decals. I will also show you guys how I apply my pinstripes and our big disco cowgirl decal. So we are going to go ahead and get started on this tutorial, but don't forget to check out the description where I list everything you need to create this tumbler, as well as discount codes from my favorite suppliers. Down below, I also have linked my tutorial group, my mentorship group, and my glitter group, so you guys can find all of them easily. If you guys are not subscribed, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you guys get notified when my next tutorial drops. All right, guys, let's get started. Here is a quick rundown on everything that's going to be covered in today's tutorial, but if you guys have specific questions, just ask down below and I will come back and answer them. All right, guys, so we are going to start with a skinny tumbler. This is just a 20-ounce skinny. I am going to spray only the top half. This is also the decal and vinyl. Both of these are up on thedrunkflamingo.com. So I decided kind of what elements I wanted on my tumbler. So I kind of cut my pattern vinyl to include all of the elements that I wanted on there. And then the rest of the tumbler was going to be the checkerboard. And I only sprayed the top half because the bottom half is going to be covered with vinyl, so there's really no need to spray paint the bottom half fully. So I'm just kind of cutting this to make sure that the decal is going to fit in the space that is not going to have the vinyl on it. I don't want that decal to overlap where the vinyl is. I just want it on the checkered part. So next we're going to take our cup cradle from Cami Page Boutique. It can also double as a straight edge. So you can take your Sharpie and draw a straight line. That way you're sure that your vinyl is going to be applied straight. I was always so intimidated by vinyl wraps until I got Brooks tools. They make it so easy to get a straight line on your tumbler so that you apply that vinyl correctly. So now that we have our line drawn, I just cut a small piece of that vinyl backing off so that this piece of vinyl can act as a hinge. And we're going to wrap it around, make sure everything is lined up correctly. This one needed to be adjusted just slightly. And of course, I adjusted it the wrong way. So once you're sure that the vinyl will line up, we are going to get our squeegee, flip it over, and start smoothing down that vinyl while also removing the backing. And this is sped up a little bit. I usually go pretty slow just to make sure that there are no wrinkles or air bubbles that form. And then we're going to cut off that excess. And this is why I always don't trash things, because I did end up using this little piece that we saved. So right now I am just using my heat gun to get that vinyl to adhere well to the tumbler, just heating up that vinyl a little bit. And I think my husband was talking to me right now, so I was distracted. So now I'm just smoothing down those edges. And then I like to take a piece of painter's tape as my guide so that I can get a straight line when I cut my vinyl. I'm just cutting off that excess. I didn't on the last tutorial that I did, and y'all saw how that ended up. My line was definitely not straight and stainless was showing. So I would rather just use a guide instead of try to freehand it. So then we're going to remove this little piece. So now here is our seam. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes seams bother me, sometimes they don't. It's not really that big of a deal, but I figured I would try to disguise it if I could. So I had this extra sheet or little piece, not even a full sheet, about 2 inches from what we cut off before. And these little elements matched up perfectly because this is where we cut our vinyl. So I just cut out the rest of the little disco ball and I just lined it up with the image that was on the tumbler already and smoothed it out. So now that seam is pretty well hidden. And I did the same thing for the longhorn. And I also cut out the other full images, which was the little lightning bolt and the star. And I do use that later on in the video as well. I try to get as much out of my vinyl as I can, because they're so cute. You don't want to just throw them away. So we're just cutting off all of the little excess from our cow skull. And then I'm just going to line him up. This one did have a little, I think it was just white on the edges, or it wasn't perfectly straight, so I did trim it a couple times. But just like tiny little things, y'all. It was kind of hard to get lined up because it kept sticking to the cut before I wanted it to. So now we have him lined up. And then I just smoothed him down. And now, if you're just glancing at the tumbler, you aren't going to notice the seam. You would really have to know where the seam was in order to point it out. And it even gets more hidden after epoxy, because we all know that epoxy smooths things out. So now that I have my vinyl wrap done, we are going to move on to taping our tumbler for our checkered board pattern. So we are going to start this just like all of the other checkerboards. It's also very similar to my spray painted plaid. And I'm just using this cup cradle as a guide just to make sure my tape was on straight, which it was. So then we're going to apply our spacer piece, then our next tape line, then we're going to remove our spacer, apply it beside the next line, and we're going to continue this around the entire cup. If you get to the end and one of your sections is a lot smaller or larger than the rest of the sections on your cup, I typically just go back around my tumbler and space things out just a little bit more. And I really just kind of eyeball everything. Like here, I know that this space is going to be slightly bigger, so I just move that piece of tape over just the tiniest bit. That way you don't have one section that is noticeably larger than the others. And next we are going to wrap the tape around the tumbler. So this is just our spacer. Typically I wrap the spacer tape all the way around the cup, but this one we really didn't need that much tape at all, so I didn't want to waste that much tape. So now that we have our tape on, I am going to use hot pink, and I was planning on using the fluorescent green as well, but my fluorescent green can was clogged. So instead of fluorescent green, I decided to use Ocean Mist, which is also another favorite spray paint color of mine, and it still also went well with the green cactus that was on the cup. So we are going to spray the top squares pink and the bottom squares the Ocean Mist. So that's all we did for the first step. So now we are going to remove all of the tape, but just like with my spray painted plaid or my other checkered tumbler tutorials, we are not going to trash this tape. We are going to save it and use it for the next step. And you do want to make sure that your paint is completely dry. I like to use flat or matte paints when I can because they dry the quickest. If you have to use a satin or gloss, I would just peel off the tape and then dry it with a heat gun, which I believe is what I did here. So now that my paint is dry, I am going to go back and tape directly over the spray painted sections we just did. And I am going to take this tape and I'm going to try to match it up as best I can with the spray painted sections on the tumbler. So I'm matching the spray painted pink on the tape to the spray painted pink on the tumbler. And we are going to do this for all of the sections. And I honestly don't wait that long for my spray paint to dry because, like I said earlier, I do use flat or matte paints pretty much all of the time. If you do use your heat gun to dry your paint, make sure that you don't have it on a high heat setting. You don't want to apply this tape to spray paint that has been heated, because then the tape will adhere better to the spray paint, and then when you go to remove it, that spray paint's going to come off with that tape. But I really don't have a problem with spray paint being removed. I honestly probably apply it right after each spray paint layer has been sprayed, honestly, unless I need to dry it with my heat gun. I never let it sit overnight. I've just never had an issue with that. Even with my spray painted plaids, I typically spray it, let it dry, and then apply the next layer. But I also try to do light coats. With this next spray painted section, I did not do a light coat. But if you do light coats, it will dry fairly quickly and you can just move on to your next step quicker. So after I applied this last tape line, what I did was spray the top section just with pink, and then the bottom squares, I ombre'd the mint and the pink. And I sprayed the pink first and then ombre'd the mint color into the pink, because if you work with this fluorescent pink, you guys will know that if you spray this pink on top of another color, it will not have that bright pink color. So I just brought the pink down almost to the bottom of the second square, and then I just went back with that mint spray paint and just barely dusted the bottom square with color. So you guys can see here that I just sprayed basically half of the square with that mint color. And I basically just hold my hand back pretty far, probably 12 inches from the cup, and just barely let the top of the spray dust that tumbler. The further you hold your hand back, the more sparse that color will be, which is what we want for that ombre. So we are now removing all of this tape, and we are no longer going to need it, so we can go ahead and trash it. And like I mentioned, I was not very light with my pink spray paint. I was pretty heavy-handed. I don't know. I was just going all out with this pink. But that also caused a few lines to bleed. So what I'm going to do now is just squirt out a little bit of the ColorFix paint, get a tiny little paintbrush, and we are just going to touch up some of those lines. And we were going to pinstripe this as well. And you can't really see like the bleed lines in the video, but they were there, I promise. And they were a little bit larger than the width of my pinstripes. So I wanted to go ahead and touch up those lines just in case the pinstripes were not going to cover them. So I like doing my touch-up on white spray paint with the ColorFix paints because they give good coverage without being overly white, if that even makes sense. I don't know if it does or not, but this white is just going to blend right into that spray paint color, and you're not even going to be able to tell under epoxy. So once this ColorFix paint dries, we'll be ready to apply our pinstripes. And I went ahead and layered my superfine gold pinstripe, which is the 0.03 size, on top of the teal or mint colored and the pink. So these are layered pinstripes. One is pink and gold, the other is that teal color and gold. And I alternated the colors that I used when I was applying them. So every other line was pink, and then every other line was teal. And here I'm kind of contemplating like how I'm going to do this. Like, did I want to do them all one color and then all one color going the opposite direction? And if you guys did not know, I do have a file on thedrunkflamingo.com for pinstripes. It has my most popular sizes, which is the 0.07, 0.05, and 0.03. And when I do pinstripes, I like to print out a full sheet so that I have multiple sizes and multiple colors that I can use and layer if I need to. This pink and teal color, I did not do a full sheet. I believe these were just random leftover pinstripes that I've had. I usually don't use these colors too much, but I thought that they went perfect with this cup. And I just noticed that y'all can probably hear my dogs panting in the background. They have been running around like the crazy puppies they are. And yes, they have plenty of water, don't worry. They're just being goofballs. So next what I decided to do was just wrap the pinstripes going the opposite way, just in gold. And I decided that it would look kind of cool if I kind of applied these or cut them like a basket weave. So basically what I did is I wrapped the gold pinstripe all the way around the cup, and then I cut the pinstripe right before the pink pinstripes on one line, and then the next pinstripe I applied, I cut the pinstripe right before the teal line. So right here, I'm just going to remove that little section that is overlapping the pink pinstripes so that it looks like the gold pinstripe is going underneath the pink pinstripe and over the teal pinstripe. And then for the next gold pinstripe that we apply, I'm going to switch that up and I'm going to cut it before the teal pinstripe so that it looks like it's going under the teal pinstripe and over the pink pinstripe. And I'm just using a blade to do this with. I don't put it in my blade holder because I don't know, I don't get a very good angle when I'm trying to cut those tiny little pieces. So just be careful, don't cut yourself. So we are wrapping our second gold pinstripe. And now we're going to cut this one right before the teal pinstripe. And we're going to do this to all of the teal pinstripes. We're going to cut that little piece that is covering the teal pinstripe. And if you are going to do this, you do need to make sure that your blade is pretty sharp because you want a crisp cut line. You just have to be careful. And then for the last line, we're going to go back to how we did it the first time, and we're going to cut the pinstripe right before the pink pinstripe. And then after we get done cutting this one, I decided just to do a regular gold pinstripe, kind of for the divide where the vinyl meets the checkerboard pattern. And I just wrapped the pinstripe over all of the other pinstripes. It's kind of like the finishing line, I guess, or the separation line. And I did do a thicker pinstripe for that line. And once you get done with your pinstripes, I do seal my pinstripes. If you guys have watched my videos before, you will know that the textured gold vinyl, for some reason, does not allow epoxy to stick to it. I have peeled off epoxy that does not stick to this vinyl in the past, so I always seal it. And in other videos, I show you guys how I apply UV resin just to the ends of my pinstripes, which will help prevent the ends from lifting under epoxy. And once the ends are sealed with UV resin, I go over everything with Quick Seal from Artistry just to make sure that everything is covered, nothing is going to be repelled. And here you can see me pressing down those pinstripe lines, especially where they overlap with heat, before I do anything else. And once your lines are sealed, we are going to put 2 coats of epoxy on this. My favorite epoxy is Artistry's Fast Set, which we do have a discount code down below for. And once that epoxy cures, we are going to warm the top rim of our tumbler with hot water, just enough to soften it the tiniest amount. And we are going to use this edging tool from Cami Page Boutique, which is typically designed to cut or trim vinyl, but I also use it for my epoxy rims. We're just going to turn this tumbler and let that blade cut through that first layer or 2 of epoxy. And this, I believe I only did 1 coat of epoxy on this one, so it was super, super thin. Usually I can peel that rim off in 1 strip, but this was pretty thin because I really just needed to cover those pinstripes so that I had a smooth surface to work with. But you guys can see that it's still just coming off pretty easily. I will show y'all a close-up in just a second. And I do this for all of my cups. I will say that if you do let your cups sit for a couple of days, it will be a little bit harder for that blade to cut through your epoxy. But after we get that epoxy off of the rim, I'm going to take some acetone and just clean off any remaining spray paint or debris that may be on our rim. And this is how I get my clean, even rims on all of my tumblers. And this will also ensure that you have a good seal on your cup and that everything is sealed in nicely. You're not going to have a broken rim. So next, we are going to apply our decal. And I am going to use my lined transfer tape. This is also in my Amazon storefront. I will also link it below. And I like to use lined transfer tape just because it helps me get everything on there straight. Because I can line up the lines on the transfer tape with either the top of the tumbler or a line on my actual cup. And I'm just lining up my decal. I like to press it down in the center and then smooth down each side, making sure that no air bubbles are popping up. Then we're going to remove our transfer tape. And then you guys can see that little lightning bolt and star that I cut out from the vinyl scraps that I had. And I thought that those would just be a cute little addition to the tumbler as well. And I also want to point out, I am moving the star down because there was just a little section of spray paint that it looked like I had nicked with my nails or something. So it wasn't as bright pink as the rest of the cup. That's just me being nitpicky. I know some of you guys can relate. So I was just deciding where I was going to place these other little elements. And after we get these on there, I am going to take it back downstairs, put it on my turner for another 2 layers of epoxy. Like I said, I use Artistry's Fast Set, and you can use that for a final coat. And here are my final pictures. I really like how this cup turned out. It's definitely out of my color wheelhouse. Like, I would rather do neutrals, but this was definitely fun to do. If you guys snag some of this vinyl or decal, please post what you guys make. I love to see what you guys come up with. If y'all enjoyed this tutorial or learned something new, please like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to catch the next video coming up that was picked just for you. As always, if you're looking for more tips, tricks, or tutorials, be sure to check out my tutorial group, my mentorship group, or my Drunk Flamingo glitter group. Thanks for watching.